Today we're talking about value and value patterns, and we're going to use the motif of a father-son fishing by the oceanside to communicate an exercise with tonal values, lights and darks. Value patterns are ways in which artists simplify or structure the values, lights and darks in their painting for an effective mood and especially for effective communication. I'm going to be showing you some short examples of the simple value patterns that we use. One of the first is a mid-tone with a small light. This is used throughout history. The painting that you see is one of Rembrandt's. There's a second method, and this painting uses a small dark in an overall mid-tone. Here you can see the painting by Monet, which is exemplifying that tonal value pattern. A third example would be a combination of small dark in a medium-sized light with an overall mid-tone. And you can see that at work in Andrew Wyeth's painting. A fourth example will be a small light and a larger mid-tone in an overall mid-value. And you can see that in Millet's piece, The Sowers. A sixth value pattern is a graded tonal value pattern where there's a gradual change from light to dark. Very effective in communicating water scenes or sky scenes. This is Whistler's painting. In today's work, value pattern that seems to come to mind is this small dark in a medium-sized light and an overall mid-value. So basically simplifying the tonal structure into 3 tones. This helps a lot in looking at a complex subject and deciding how to think of it in tonal values. It also helps to keep one out of trouble. For example, in painting a scene of flowers, a bouquet of flowers against a background. Many times I've seen students paint the flowers and get a really beautiful rendition of the flowers against the white paper, and then a background is added, and suddenly the flowers have disappeared. They're not as beautiful as they once were against that white background. The reason is the student was kind of using the background in the beginning to paint the flowers. In other words, they were painting the flowers into a white background. And once that background was adjusted or painted, the flowers became absorbed in it and they lost their distinction. So it's very easy to get into that sort of trouble, and with an understanding of tonal values, contrast, and an extension of that in these value patterns, you can keep yourself out of trouble or understand better where the trouble lies. Let's put it that way. So we've moved along in the painting, and in this stage, I believe you can see that I've used a single tone, a grayish tone. It's a mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna to basically capture the whites, the major white that's surrounding my figures, some of the smaller waves that recede in the plane. And now after applying that lighter tone to kind of give myself an idea of how to approach the painting, I'm going in with medium tone darks to create this rocking motion in the waves. The strokes, if you're watching, are very slow Z's or S's that help to give a feeling of the surface of the water. And it's not apparent in the image, the photograph that was used, but an exaggeration of some of the things that I observed. There's a nice, I'm keeping some strong whites, as you can see in the waves, moving from near to far. Later on, I anticipate muting those, especially as they go back in the painting, so that there is a greater sense that this plane is receding into the distance. But for the moment, I'm staying with the darks in the foreground. I'm trying to make them a little darker using a smaller brush. Some of the areas are wet, some are dry, so I'm getting an interesting combination of dry brush strokes and brush strokes that are dissolving into the wet brush strokes. Again, the palette is muted. It's not a bright day, it's an overcast day. And the colors that I've chosen to use are burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And the ultramarine blue is really kind of controlling the painting. By that I mean most of the grays are cooler grays. I will be using in the foreground, where I want it to come forward a little bit, and also give some of the local colors to the rocks. I'll be using more of the burnt sienna in the mixture. So the mixture is, well, maybe it's only 2 colors. We can generate quite a few variations with those 2 colors. It's not a bad idea or not a bad way to extend the notion of doing a grayscale painting, in other words, a single color painting, to extend it by using 2 colors, 2 possibly complementary hues, in this case a reddish brown and a blue. Yellow ochre, cobalt blue is another good combination. Alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, another one. You can do a lot with 2 colors, is basically what I'm trying to say. And it asks you to think about your subject differently. You're not trying to match the color as much as you are trying to match the lightness and darkness of your subject, and as well as make some interesting variations of these 2 colors. So the painting process is simplified a lot, and in the process you learn how these 2 colors work together. So for anyone who's interested in watercolor, interested in exploring watercolor, a simple means is often the best way to do it, and I can recommend single color studies and these 2 color studies as a way of understanding how the watercolors work together, how the various colors work together. So the painting's coming along. We're refining some of the bright surfaces on the rocks now with deeper darks, and in addition to that, of course, we're defining the backside or the underside of these rocks to give us a strong sense of their forms. Lastly, we're coming to the figures. The father seems to be growing right up out of the rocks, which is the intention. I would like to have more attention falling on the sun, standing on the rocks, looking outward. The perspective in this piece, as you've noticed, is a little unusual. In other words, we're looking down on our subject, and this plays a role in how we structure the figure. For example, the head tends to be more inset on the shoulders, so that we feel we're looking down. Also, even though the child's figure is smaller, it's taller in the picture plane. That's because we're looking down from an elevation. As the painting dries, we return with some stronger edges and stronger darks into the rocks. And notice how the light edges are kind of giving us some directionals. They're pointing, or they're leading to the figures. This helps visually to reinforce this as a center of interest. Tonal contrast is the major thing that I'm using to generate this center of interest. The dark shorts and legs of the boy against the white of the paper is perhaps my strongest area of contrast, and that combined with the fact that it is a person gravitates us to that area in the painting. What else I can do, and I will do, is add a light tone to the waves in the background, the white waves. This adjustment is works to push the distant waves further back in the painting and bring the foreground closer to us. So I'm doing it at this stage rather than the beginning, so that I can judge more precisely how much color to add to those distant waves. In other words, I can relate it to the darks in the foreground. This is the reason I often leave a lot of whites in my painting, white paper, and adjust them as the image develops or towards the end of the image. I find this method easier and more accurate in getting a good relationship between the lights and darks in the painting. So even though it's two colors, there's enough color information, enough variety, and putting a little accent color, such as a nice light blue in the shirt of the father and blue pants, is enough to give us an enjoyment of color in this grayscale painting.